25th of December called Christmas. What is it really about? Can Muslims and Christians and others partake in it or not? So the first thing, before we get into opinions and things, let's look at some historic facts. Where did the 25th of December come from? Was this a day that biblically Jesus was born? That is not the case. That is not the case. If we go back, for example, National Geographic has a book, An Uncommon History of Common Things. And if you look at any of the research that we have seen, whether it's on the internet or in books about Christmas, they write that Christmas was not a part of the Christian faith. In fact, for 4 centuries after Isa alayhi salam's ascension, for 4 centuries after Jesus, there was no such concept in Christianity. It's non-Muslim research that for 4 centuries after Jesus, there was no idea of the 25th of December being tied to Jesus. So in fact, if we look in the Bible, in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, if you look at historic documentation, it's proven that the 25th of December has absolutely nothing to do with the birth of Jesus. Nothing. Not a shred of evidence that shows that Jesus was born on the 25th of December. In fact, it was not until Pope Julius I, he chose the date. And why? To appease the pagans for a festival that had for Saturnalia, which was to celebrate Saturn, the sun god. This was a festival, Saturnalia, that they had in pagan Rome from before Christianity even reached Rome. And what would they do on this festival? They would give gifts. Seem familiar? They would go and decorate a fern or a evergreen comfort tree with red berries. Seem familiar? And they would party and they would loosen the laws of decency to do very indecent things in those days. And the pagans were not willing to give up this holiday. So Pope Julius I, 400 years after Jesus, he came up with the idea to take this pagan holiday and bring it into the Christian religion. And the early Christians, they fought this. They stood up against this. Oliver Cromwell in the British Parliament, in 1659, he had it banned. And the purists who came to America, the settlers who came to this country from Europe, they did not celebrate it because they also believed this was a pagan festival. In fact, it was banned. It was illegal in the United States. When the pilgrims came here, the purists who wanted to follow the Christian religion properly, they banned Christmas. You can Google and see pictures of those scans that you can find of old postings that used to be posted saying that this is not allowed in this country, and at that time what was going to be America, because it's a pagan festival. If we look at today, many Christians who are researchers, who are people who want to follow their religion, they've also spoken out against this pagan festival. If we look at Santa Claus, who's now called Santa, and if you switch a few letters, it'll be Satan. If you look at Santa Claus, there was no such tradition tied to Christmas. Saint Nicholas had nothing to do with Christmas. They just took a man and they took a Nordic pagan legend about a man who would come in green until Coca-Cola made him red. And they made this tradition from nowhere, from pagan festivals. So how can true Christians or Jews or Muslims celebrate a pagan festival that has absolutely nothing to do with Jesus? He's not the reason for the season.